the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast.
Episode 30.
Your company has come up with a bright idea. From now on, the announcement states everyone will share the same task management software. It's sold as a win win for everyone. But you realize that this is a problem. Your favorite task management software will now be a sideshow as you're forced to change your practices. Gone are some things you like to do using your software's features. Also, there will be some shared tasks that everyone can see. You're not sure if this is a good thing or bad, or what you should do about it. Tune into this episode to hear from me and my special guest, Renee Clair, as we solve this wicked problem together. Welcome to the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast. And welcome back. And as you can see, I've brought on our special guest, Renee Clair. And just before I introduce Renee, I want to welcome you if this is the first time that you've been actually logging into this particular podcast. It's a lot different from other podcasts. We don't quite interview people and ask them about books that they've read and that kind of thing. Instead, I invite folks on to come and help us solve a wicked problem, something that does not seem to have an easy solution, but something real, kind of like real life, right? And the approach that we take is, I would say, we follow Einstein because he said that if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. Albert said that. So we're going to spend a good amount of time trying to tear the problem apart before trying to address the solutions. And as we do so, what's a little bit different from this podcast is that we're trying to come up with something that is brand new that neither of us have ever thought of before. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. No, if we do, you're going to hear a bell. If we get to the end of the podcast, you may hear a buzzer, which means that time ran out and we weren't able to come up with any new brilliant insights that don't have to be earth shaking, just at least something that, that is a function of the two of us coming together, trying to solve the problem, putting our heads together, finding some new kind of solution, and going, yeah, we just discovered something that's kind of cool and something is kind of new. All right, so Simon, start with a story. Simon is a productivity enthusiast who enjoys being a high performer. One area that he's mastered is his personal task management, and he relies on a software called ABC to stay on top of hundreds of tasks at a time. But yesterday, he opened his email messages to find an announcement from the IT department. From now on, the company is strongly recommending that all employees change to a group based task management software. He responds with an angry email to IT. You cannot be serious. A manager of IT actually calls him back and he explains it's only a recommendation. You're free to continue to use your ABC app. Simon says, thank you. But a month later, his boss, Kathy, calls him in. Simon, you're missing some key deliverables. In response to his very confused look, she asks him, aren't you checking your ABC inbox? Don't use ABC, he explains. Well, by the end of their discussion, she gives him a look, which could be understood to mean use it or else. Now what? So, to help us solve this very wicked problem, which is running rampant, you may say, through corporations all the way around the world, we have Renee Clair. And let me tell you about Renee. Renee is the productive wellness entrepreneur. That's her moniker. She's a productivity consultant for small business owners in the wellness industry. She helps clients lighten their workloads so they have more time and energy to enlighten others. Her clients gain deep values of boundary setting and self compassion through her fun approach to otherwise dull productivity tasks. Renee specializes in process, project, and change management, which often includes recruiting, training, automation, and time management. She lives in San Antonio, Texas, with her fiance and their 4 dogs. She works from home, travels often to her favorite state of California, loves to sing karaoke, and is a big fan of chocolate and tea. Yay, chocolate! Renee holds a Master's of Arts in industrial and organization psychology, as well as a 200-hour yoga teacher certificate. And welcome, Renee.
Hi, Francis. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, what do you think of the Simon situation? That's off the top of your head.
It is classic. I've seen it happen on many occasions, and doesn't matter if it's a large corporation or a small business. This is definitely something I keep seeing happening, and I am just kind of baffled by it. Being a marketing project manager, I'm not sure how to always handle the situation with grace and ease and guidance.
I suspect that if anyone has ever been through a situation like this, they are feeling the same way because you kind of want it to work out peacefully, but it's not easy, is it?
No. Oh my gosh. No, it's not. And it's really hard, being at the other end as a messenger. Often the messenger, like, hey,
You're the
we
one
got
who
this.
carries the message.
Yes. And I can tell you, I am met with all kinds of reactions and all kinds of personalities and preferences. And it tends to be an interesting game of, push and pull, right?
All right, let's talk about that because if you're the person who's on the receiving end, like a Simon, you're dealing with a power situation, right? You're dealing with an IT manager who has some power. At the same time, you're also wrestling with yourself on the inside, wondering, what should I do? Because it's not as simple as just, being I can't use that word, I guess, being a jerk. There we go. It's not just a matter of resisting the demand to conform. You're
Right.
also wondering if you have any sensitivity and self-reflection, whether or not you're doing the right thing, right? Because you kind of doubt yourself, right?
Yep. Exactly. And I think there comes a little bit of fear, knowing that, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, other people are going to see what I'm doing. There's that piece that we love in corporations. We love the word transparency, but what does that really mean as an individual contributor? And what if we have someone in our lives that's a micromanager? What does that look like? What does that mean? What does that mean for our morale in the corporation?
Right, right. So it's easy, I think, to start off thinking that the corporation and IT are the enemy, or the software is the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
But on reflection, you kind of wonder if the enemy is not inside of you. It's not your own resistance, not your own ego. Because the group is asking you, you're a paid employee, and would you conform to what all the rest of us are doing, so that we can all benefit, right? It's
Yes.
old as like, this is what we're all doing, right?
Sure it is. Yeah, and then we all nod our heads and then go and talk amongst ourselves on Slack.
Right. So we resist quietly, and outwardly we, in this case, Simon was given a back door, and he took the back door, which is that,
Yeah.
oh, it's a recommendation. So he said, oh, okay, that means therefore, but it comes with a problem, which is that there's some discomfort that comes around because he said no, because because he's not using ABC. The tasks that are being shared in the group aren't visible to him because he's not using it at all. So unless he's given the task in a meeting or via email, he's not
Mm-hmm.
seeing the ones that are transferred within the software.
Mm-hmm.
So now he has a tangible problem of not being able to produce his deliverables. And then he has now all of the new angst that goes with not being a contributor. That, he's a high performer, so he wants to. He's always been. He expects to, and no, he's not delivering, and he's starting to feel just a little bit of anxiety and doubt.
Yeah, and definitely that anger too, like that this new software is contributing to this perceived failure, and that's a lot to take on when you're a type A or a go getter for sure.
Hmm. and you're on the wrong end of the stick, because
Exactly. It's a
if everyone
phenomenon.
else is using it,
Yeah, exactly.
you're like the only one hanging out there, kind of like, what? Are you kind of taking a stand? Are you being super productive? By the time all of the forces kind of land on towards poor Simon, inside there's like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. This is if he's
Right.
a little bit self-reflective. He could be just a
Yeah.
jerk and just say, "I'm right, they're wrong," and I'll fight this all the way to the breadline or something like that, right? Hire
Yes.
me if you must.
Yeah, I will be defiant as possible. Yes, I try to look on the good side of people and be like, okay, well, what's the reason underneath this defiance? What is this saying about you? What are you
Yeah, you
internalizing
start
it
to
is?
pull out
But that's the
amendments to the
psychology part.
Constitution and say,
Yeah.
I have a right to. It's guaranteed. You start to go that route. It's like, oh boy.
Yes.
But
But yeah, there's just this internal turmoil of emotions and self beliefs that are coming up for poor Simon, as he's being faced with this dilemma. And he's kind of caught in the crosshairs. Like, okay, IT saying it's okay. His manager, I mean, it's okay if he doesn't use it. His manager's
right,
like, no. So, what's going on at the higher level, for the rest of the employees? Is everybody else on board? And
right. But
then,
his boss, if he's in the game of, I hate to say it, being a team player, but that's probably what his boss said to him. Simon, it all
oh,
comes down to whether or not you want to be a team player or not. So you let me
yes.
know, something like that. And you're like, that
You're like,
doesn't
I thought
sound.
I always was a team player.
uh, It's not sounding like a recommendation anymore. It's sounding like I'm questioning your contribution and your willingness to, when in a company, when someone says you're not being a team player, you're in trouble,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. It's like, okay, am I on the verge of being written up? Do I need to start putting my things into a cardboard box?
Something ugly is about to happen when you get that, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna get a knock on the door, and the guy with the security guy with a
Oh
gun
no.
comes in there,
Badge.
yeah, with a badge. Yeah, ask for your badge, but you try to log in and you can't because they've changed your login without you knowing. And then there's a box, right? They always have that. The security guard brings that box for you. It says, "This is it, buddy. Sorry."
Yeah. We could
It's not.
we could write a movie.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Layoffs I've seen and witnessed.
Oh
Ugh.
my gosh. Do you
But
know, Francis, I always
go ahead.
wanted to write a book called Life After Layoffs because I was laid off so many times that there is life after
Oh,
that.
yeah. I remember I had a colleague who was laid off with a security guard with a gun with the box,
Oh my
and
gosh.
he really took it really hard. He didn't
Yeah.
see it coming, and it took him a while to recover. But
Yeah.
short of getting to that point, there should be a way to resolve. I can't. This is like this is it's for some of our listeners. Listener, if you're hearing this and you've never heard of it before, consider this to be a heads up because there's going to be more of it. It's
Yeah.
this if it's not hasn't visited your company yet, or you don't know what we're talking about, consider that it very well might. It might not be task management, but it could be some element of your productivity ecosystem that you may have even instigated it by gone off the edge and found some exotic AI driven thing that no one understands or has even heard of, and you found it and it's sliced bread for you, latest thing. And then IT says, "You're using what?" And unless it's on your phone, they may have a conversation with you about security. But anyway, the conflict is still it's inherent whenever software choices are real. And the truth is, there really should be a way to attack this problem, even from the way
Hmm.
it's set up from the very beginning.
Hmm.
That so we're trying to find a peaceful solution to this. Even looking back all the way to when it began. Thank you. Um, and as it was envisioned, as it was rolled out, um, there's probably a bunch of things that could be introduced to resolve the situation. And So maybe it doesn't even get to this point. I don't know. We're about to find out. But let's assume that this is not a problem that is going to go away just because software is getting better or anything like that. And the implications for people like Simon are very real.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we start with that? If this doesn't get solved, he could be he could end up leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he could leave on his own. Maybe he gets
Hmm.
frustrated. He feels like a failure, or management says, okay, you haven't proven yourself. You're delayed. You're not performing. Underperformer now. Or maybe they go on a performance approval plan.
Hmm.
Um, and then, it can even kind of grow out from there, right? Like it starts with the individual and then grows to the organization. So team members can be affected. The morale can suffer. Um,
Hmm.
there's just a lot that goes with it when there's not this sort of peaceful unity of adoption of a new software of any kind. But in this instance, with the task management software.
Yeah, as
Uh,
we know, task management software is probably the one that you touch the most. If you use task management software, you're always managing tasks.
mm-hmm.
So more than PowerPoint or Excel or Word, or it's right up there with email software, which is
Yes.
something that you use all day. Um, you really don't want to do without. And he could go down the route of what people typically do, which is I have a list there of options like surrender and resist. So you have people who pretend to surrender, and what they're really doing is fighting it all the way down. Then you have the passive aggressives, right? So they're also pretending, but they're not really using. They say, "Oh, sure, I'll use the software," and they never, and they don't even log in or open it, and they find other ways to work around it. And then there's the ones who say, "I'm going to go to the CEO with this and complain." You know, there's people who will just outright say, "I'm not using it," and that's the end. That's the end of it. I'm not going to ruin my productivity because you all like different software. No.
Mm-hmm.
So do any of those work?
Probably not, but I love the confidence that people have.
Some do believe, yeah, that'll kind of work out if they go that route, go one of those routes.
Yeah.
But
And then it ends up costing the company more money, and then I'm thinking back to my master's degree days and one of my college courses where people felt like they weren't being compensated or they were unhappy. They'd take things home like paper clips or staplers or paper reams of paper to compensate themselves or help themselves feel better. So I think it could
right,
be really costly to the organization as a whole. Just kind of
right.
keep going from there.
And they start coming in late and taking sick days and start doing all these things that
Bingo.
they don't work. But
No.
it exacerbates the problem because the root cause really isn't addressed. And sometimes IT could just come across like a sledgehammer. They're not there to really solve your psychological issue. They're there to put in software. So they put in the software, so their job is done. Change management isn't a part of what they're interested in. It's not in their remit. So they just announce and move on. And they've moved on to 10 times other kinds of software. And here you are stuck up on the first one.
Yeah, yep, exactly. You just got used to using this other software and here's another one. You're like, is it ever gonna end?
And the
Probably
answer
not
is
in
no,
this.
because IT is like rolling stuff out. That's oh yeah, we're rolling it out. Is there any change management? Any what? Yeah, we sent an email to let everybody know.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the change management. Yeah, sure, sure.
We're changing.
So
That's the change management. Yeah, I love that. That makes me laugh.
oh
Okay.
yeah, can't you read it? We're changing. So Simon doesn't really get any assistance, and his way of responding to it really doesn't work. And
Mm-mm.
the buy-in, the aspect of getting people to agree before announcing it or helping them to transition, um, or and there's some leaders who will just people roll their eyes, they just say whatever, get used to it, and they just keep moving on. And that's probably one reason why IT will keep doing what it's doing without any not say repercussions, but without any cushioning.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Well, they're rolling it out and downloading the software for everybody, but then they don't see how it's really affecting humans, and what does that really look like? And some people are getting left in the dust, and I don't really see people relishing. I don't really see a lot of people really knowing what to do with it, even if they are using it every day. Like I feel like people are just sitting in kind of this darkness, not really knowing or feeling confused, but they're trying their best to go along.
right. I think part of the reason that this can kind of continue, because let's imagine that your organization says that we're going to use Slack for our task manager. Bad idea, right? But somebody has decided somewhere that that's what they're going to do, and they start rolling this out, and you come across a group of people who actually know something about task management, and they say, "This is a bad idea. Do you know that?" And IT says, "Huh? Oh, it's already been decided." Let us say, go conform. And
No.
this really bad idea, because part of it is that no one who is making the decision understands how task management works,
Hmm. Right. Exactly.
and they
Yes.
keep making mistakes like this because especially in kind of medium-sized companies where people making the decisions have the power but not the know-how.
Yes.
And
Yep.
does that ring a
I've,
bell?
I've Yeah, I'm like, yes. I've seen it quite a few times where management's like, yes, get on board with this task management software, and then they come back to the communication software, and they're like, you do this, and this is urgent, and everything's urgent, and there's no like, it's it's so difficult to keep track of all the details and the pieces and understand a viable deadline when it's in a communication software.
Right. And the fact is you don't solve the problem by having people who are clueless make the decisions, because they'll always make the same mistake. It'll just be
Yeah.
different software as you
Right.
move along.
They mean
Um,
well. I know they mean well.
and they actually, that's true. So they're not evil. They're not they're the villain of the story, but it's not because they're evil. It's because they're just Slack
Ignorant.
for task management is a sign of cluelessness, right? It's just it's benign ignorance
Yes.
at best,
And
right?
yes, and Francis, and you and I had talked about this word before, because I hesitate using it because it gets such a bad rap, but we're really using ignorance and just they don't know. They're not just
Right,
not aware of what the best action to take. There's never a correct action, but like the best one, and how to lead in that regard too, which is huge, a huge part of being a manager and a leader.
right, right. But you can be a great leader traditionally in the analog world. So, and here along comes the
That's true.
digital world. There's this distinction floating around, right, about analogs who are over the age of like 40. I won't date you, okay? But digital natives, analog natives, think that digital is an appendix to the analog world. But digital
Wow.
natives who are like supposed to be 35 and under,
I
all
am
right, are
actually,
supposed to, well, not supposed to, they've been brought up in a world of digital solutions.
yes. Francis,
Go ahead.
I've been told that this is a unique thing about me. I'm actually at that junction between analog and digital, so I understand both worlds and can help people transition, which is neat. I didn't really know that about myself, but for those of you watching, I am much older than I look,
Excellent.
but I appreciate my analog family. I really do. And digital peeps, they
Well,
move very, very quickly. Oh, they
right.
move very quickly, but I think
And
they miss some of
they,
the pieces.
well, usually the best idea is to combine the best of the both. But if you have what's typical, you have an analog manager making decisions like, oh, I just started using Slack last week, and so should you, as opposed to digital natives who are like, I've been using Slack for 5 years and I stopped using it last year because it doesn't work for the following reasons, especially for task management. So they're way ahead of the game. And an analog who makes these decisions could screw up everyone's productivity. Not to say of upsetting people, because they just don't understand the inner workings.
Yeah, the
Um,
nuances. Yep.
right, right, and they think, just like you said, they think they're doing a good thing, and in fact, they are making making something worse.
Yes. So you bring up a huge point to this. Like we're looking at generational gaps
Mhm.
and understanding. We're looking at individual preferences. We're looking at groups and group psychology and conformity and that kind of thing. There's a lot going on in this like little teeny tiny question.
Right. There is a, but it's also very personal because this isn't like changing your desk.
No,
You
it's a
know, that could
lifestyle
be
change. Yeah.
changing your desk could be annoying, but this is this is changing something that is at the heart of like what you do every day. It's like at the it's almost like the soul of your productivity is your task management. And here it is that something from outside of you that you don't have any power over is now messing with it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's almost like saying, here's the deodorant you should be using, to use a physical analog equivalent that people could relate to, perhaps. It's like, don't use any other kind except this. And you're like, what? No, no, because the choice of software that you're using is on a frequent basis like this is extremely, we could say it's a personal matter. It's not just a
Mm-hmm.
matter of, oh, you could teach yourself how to use this, right? Because
Mm-mm.
you might say that, for example, like a new app, like what? So I picked up Duolingo the other day to learn Spanish,
Oh, fun.
and that thing is like magic. It's amazing,
It
right?
is. It is, yes.
So someone recommends that you use Duolingo, and it's like, oh yeah, sure, because it's an add-on. It's not essential or inherent to my work.
Mm-hmm.
And if I stop using it, it's like no big deal, and I pick it back up later. And it's not a personal matter of using. It's not. I don't take that personally. And if Duolingo stops, it's like, oh well, I'll just find the next one, right? It probably won't be as cool as Duolingo, isn't as much fun, but I could make the switch. But when you tell me about my task management software and maybe my email software as well, my ears perk up.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us some more about your laughing there.
Oh my gosh. It's true. I have so many people ask me, okay, Renee, what task management software should I use? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's such a personal thing. And then I explain the ones that I've experienced and work with and the pros and cons of each. I explain the one that I love and the one that's, that I really, really love that I'm not using right now.
Right.
And then the same thing, it's, if you're watching this or listening to this, it's usually Outlook versus Gmail, right? Or Apple, versus Outlook and Gmail now. And it's this interesting, like once you get into it, and I'm very partial to one of those. I'm trying not to say which ones I'm partial to. I'm trying to remain unbiased here or unbiased here, but even still, like I have really good productivity when it comes to using one of those products and across the various products. And then if I am working with another client who prefers something else, it is this little like hump that we both have to bridge, to work together and refine our productivity habits. So it's such a personal thing. And
And that's
it's almost
between
like
two
the
people, you mean?
yes. And it's like
Right.
the
Let
like
alone
the
a group of
Android.
50.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. That's a whole nother thing.
That's a whole nother thing, right? So you
It
could be
is.
the only person who wants to use your software in the group of 50. And
Mm-hmm.
now what?
Right. Yeah.
There's a social pressure to conform, perhaps. Or you join a company and you realize, my God, they're using Slack for task management. And you're like, no. And then you learn that 49 other people are in your department are using it. And they're all looking at you like, what? You don't
Mm-hmm.
use Slack for task management? And then you realize that you've discovered something they haven't. And
Yeah.
no, so you need this is if this hasn't happened to you folks, if you're listening to this episode, let's imagine that it actually will at some point. And we can, as we pivot over to the solutions, So we're moving from this world where it's just software, you can teach yourself, this is easy, which you might say is the old way of looking at things. So what we're proposing, I guess, is a new way, which is that this is kind of personal. And yes, it does have a group impact, but it's a personal matter that has a group effect. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not this easy problem that's just a matter of like a Duolingo or like playing a video game. And this is not that. This is way more tricky. All right, so let's talk about some solutions. Ready to pivot?
Let's go. Let's do it. Should
All
I
right.
stretch?
Yeah. Limbo.
Yeah,
Now it's time
cool.
to warm up is over. It's time to like now start sprinting. So
Go.
so I had an idea. A first idea I had is at the point of consideration. So is I don't even know how to do this exactly, but Simon could go to back to the source and say, so where did this decision come from?
Mm.
And he, if it's Slack for task management, for example, he may go back to the person who instigated it. Could be a vice president of something, and basically have a kind of conversation where he tries to bring in the principles of task management and help the vice president to see that he or she is making a mistake. So what do you think of that tactic as a kind of like he goes right back to the beginning? What do you think of that?
I love it just because it really does help us to gain buy in if we understand why something's being done. However, oftentimes some leadership won't share their reasoning, or they'll just say, because so and so told me to, like someone else higher up. So it's like, how far do you have to go to get the reasoning? In smaller companies, you could probably get there, right? And then, it depends on the software. If it's something that, it's like using a communication software for task management, or maybe they are recommending a new task management software that you're just not on board with, that could be a fruitful discussion with the higher ups. Like, hey, why don't you try this? But usually if you approach from that end, it's like you're inviting yourself to be a part of it. Should they say yes, right? Okay, how are you going to lead this project? Do you have time to take that on? So those are some things that I can see potentially coming up in that conversation for
Right. So
Simon.
it's kind of it could be risky for the average employee as they think about, because not only are they dealing with the power differential between the
Mm-hmm.
person who has the power to make the decision and you don't, but you also need to be able to explain how comes. And explaining how comes is that could be for you super challenging, because you'd have to go to some abstract reasoning to say why task management shouldn't and Slack aren't natural. I'm just using Slack to say because it's popular software for communicating. You could say that other kinds of email or IM or WhatsApp or Apple messaging or direct messaging, they're all equally not as good. So you'd have to go to some pretty abstract principles before explaining. You could explain at that level because you don't have a half an hour to draw diagrams and say a whole bunch of stuff, or send them a podcast and say, here, listen, or send them a book. I remember in high school I tried sending a book to a teacher. It was called a book called Teacher. I think it was called Teach a Child, and it was on teaching. I read this book and said, I think this would help her. I
Oh my
took the
God.
book to school, gave it
How
to
is
the
that
teacher.
received? How did they receive that?
Not very well. I
That's
was
what
about
I was worried about.
16 or something like that. But my parents were teachers, so they had books. So I read one of the books and said, she should read this book.
Yeah, it
So
is. It is an art to go back to your superior or their superiors and share your preferences and ask why and offer input. Especially if you're like, if Simon was angry when he was replying back to IT. If you go and approach it
mhm,
with anger, people
mhm,
usually just shut down at that point. It could be setting up for failure. So, yeah, that's
right.
interesting.
So maybe Simon would need to go back to, not go back to, sorry, before approaching the big, the the one who has the power and the decision, and do
Hmm.
some practicing.
Role
Practice the
playing.
message. Yeah, some role playing. Find some of his colleagues who, I'm getting ready to go talk to Mr. Big or Miss Big, and it's about their favorite software and using it for task management, and I just want to go through some principles and to, show them sort of why, pick your language carefully, why that's old thinking, why it doesn't work, why it causes a problem, sort of why. Um, and role play it to the point where it's ready for the road. What do you think?
Yes, I'm a firm believer in role play.
And if he let's imagine he doesn't get through, so he tries the role play method and he never quite is able to put together a coherent kind of case. So he
Okay.
can't explain from first principles why it's a bad idea. What should he try next?
What should he try next? I would say come into kind of the 180,
Mhm.
understanding the current software's potential benefits, whether it's communication or Slack or something else. So understanding, well, how could this work? How could this be a benefit for me? And approach it in that way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so doing like a deep dive into how can I make this work?
Yeah. And almost, it's kind of funny to say this, but almost getting your own buy-in, right? Usually we want our superiors to gain our buy-in, but sometimes we have to do it for ourselves. Like, well, how can I make this interesting and fun and usable for my purposes here? And almost like a game. Well, okay, I'm excelling here with my own task management
Right.
software. I've got this new thing. How can I make this work now so I can keep excelling, right? I'm thinking about my overachievers on the line here.
Right, right. Well, there's two things I think you mentioned that I picked up on. So one is using it to the point where you authentically start to find a way that it's useful. So using
You're,
it to the point where you're able to say, oh, okay, actually, if I do this and I do that and I do the other, it starts to work.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
you're
it's more
authentically
organic.
finding a path that you initially hadn't thought of. And that may mean digging into the features. It may mean messing around with some of the options, changing the settings. You might have to go into Zapier to find maybe there's a way to just use this as a front end that sends all the tasks via Zapier into my regular task management software. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
using it, but I'm not using it the way, I'm using all the features. I'm just using it as input.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's ways to, use pieces of it and you actually be happy with the result at the end, because presumably Simon does want a good job to do a good job, and he wants to know when his um, colleagues have a task for him to do, and should he ask all 49 of them to leave the software ABC or the new software, and should they then use a different method to get the message to him? Should they then send it by email as opposed to the new software? It's probably a little bit, I- it's a little bit special to want everybody to change their behavior just to suit you.
Yes.
But with maybe there's a way to have his cake and eat it too. So that's the
There
first
could
thing I
be.
thought of. So that way you're authentically buying in.
Yes. I think there could be. I've actually experienced that as a project manager. It
Okay.
gets tiresome for the project manager to do that, to do individual things. So just thinking on that side, but and then for the individual, I think it would might depend on the size of the organization too. If there's
Mm-hmm.
like just a couple of employees, sure, maybe they can have individual preferences. But if we're talking about a larger corporation, or if things
Mm-hmm.
are just super fast paced, I
Mm-hmm.
could easily see things getting missed, even by the manager who's promising to send the separate emails or do something unique for Simon.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Simon very well could keep getting left in the dark depending on those unique circumstances of his team or the work
Mm-hmm.
environment.
Mm-hmm. So the intent there could be you could have a good intent and he may want it to work and he may find a way for it to work. So
Mm-hmm.
he works it out on his own, ordinary actions. But
Mm-hmm.
how about this as another option, which is that you said it's like a game. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the ethos of having it be like a game brings some of the play back into it. So it's not like you're personally violating my space. It no moves from it being an attack to it being a fun, challenging, entertaining way of finding a solution. And you could play the game and win the way that you said, the first way, which is that you make it work, using whatever Zapier and whatever else.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you could also play it like a game and make it fail, right?
Ooh, tell me about that. What do you think? What are you
Like
thinking?
you decide to play with it as much as you can,
Okay.
and you start to catalog the things you have to do manually and the things
Mm,
that it does not do that your old software used to have.
okay. Yes.
So now you have in front of you a list of things that it used to do and you now need to do. And you're looking at some costs. So, you can say, based on 60 tasks a day that I'm managing, this is going to cost me about a half a minute per. So we're looking at a 30-minute cost to use this particular software. And there could be easily unintended consequences, like there are for a program like Slack. Is
Mm-hmm.
that it seems, at small volumes of messages, it's cool. A small number of people, it's cool. It's a nice, cool way to message each other. But get up to 50 people, 100, 200, and the same problem that occurs with email, have in Slack, and start hating it the same way you hated. And not to rain on Slack's parade. It's just that any kind of instant messaging is not going to replace email once you get to high volumes. They're going to all kind of start going out of whack in the same way. So,
Yes.
in his good faith efforts, he could actually break the software in the sense that he could show that it's a worse by virtue of playing with it. Show that it's a poor substitute, and then make a case from there that guess what, I'm losing half an hour, and I think everybody else is, and half an hour times 50 people, and he does some math and he starts to put some dollars to it, and
I
he
love that.
says, so he starts to say, he starts to actually build a bottom line case that, that Mr. or Mr. or Miss Big made this decision. They didn't use any data or any underlying analysis to decide. It's because they kind of liked it, and they're now costing us $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Data speaks louder than words to certain leaders in an organization, for sure.
So I think your idea deserves a ding, a ding. This is one of our bings. Why? Because the idea of gamifying software until it breaks by it's not the same as trying to break it. Because if you enter it and you're trying to break it, right? Someone is gonna smell a rat. Like his boss is gonna say, "Hold on a minute, you're just trying to disprove that this thing is any good." So the way you enter it, your frame of mind entering it needs to be one of play. Because if you bring
No.
bitterness and you know a sense of righteousness and all the different things that make people unbearable, if you bring all of that to the party, you're not going to get very far, right?
No. And in fact, it shuts down, pieces of our brain, so we can't be productive with or without the software. So
Right.
yes, excellent point.
Yeah, it shuts yours down and it shuts theirs down, right? Because now we're into like maybe open warfare where
Cold
it's
War. Yeah.
we're trying to use data to as our bullets to show that this damn thing is costing us $100,000 a year. And where did it come
Mhm.
from? A very
Yeah.
upset person could, jump on, let's say, the company's intranet and say, can you believe it? This new software, they said that they wanted us to be productive, and I calculated it's costing us $100,000, and whereas Simon could be right, in
Yeah,
the
he could.
in the logical sense, but because he's not approaching it from a gamified like a game, from a sense of play,
Yeah.
he loses everyone even before he starts. What is that? Have you seen that in practice?
Mm-mm.
Someone take it up, not the gamifying part because that's pretty rare, but someone
No.
being righteous and then trying to get everyone to see their point of view, and the more they talk, the more
Okay.
everybody hates them and wishes they'll
Yes.
just shut up.
Yes. It creates a very toxic environment. Yes, I've experienced that quite a few times. And then, yeah, and it does. It shuts down everybody. Everybody can't do their work. They need to take breaks. And then it's just not one day. It's several days, several weeks, and it just kind of permeates a culture. So it's a shame when that happens. But yes, and of course, I got play from thinking of counseling techniques, or even myself.
Oh,
I'm like, so
okay.
one of the things in counseling or psychology is if you are thinking from a place of curiosity or come at it from a place of play, it changes your outlook on things, and you can kind of get yourself unstuck and move forward and see what's possible. So it's really kind of neat to do this like reframing, even when it comes to productivity practices. So I love this idea, and I'm glad we came to it together, because I didn't think about the data collection part. So that was cool. That's a really cool piece.
That's why we're here on the Task Management and Time Blocking podcast to come up with some new stuff.
Yeah.
That's why we deserve that ding.
Yes.
how
All
do
the
you
days.
how do you coach or advise someone who, because they're not probably going to realize this on their own, right? They're going to be hell bent on not using this bad software and all of they have a sense of the cost that's going to. How do you advise them to bring a sense of play to it so that they don't destroy themselves and other people's productivity in at the same time? What would you say to them, Renee? Say they're talking to you at lunch table.
Yeah.
How would you engage them? And they're angry, and
Yeah.
they're going to do something about this. Damn it!
I would say, hello, Simon. Will you share your French fries with me, first of all? And then after that, I might, just be really curious, because usually first it's a good idea to figure out what's underneath the anger. And so,
Hmm.
okay, I hear that you're angry, what's underneath that? Well, I'm afraid of failure, or change is really difficult for me, which is usually what I see, no matter the generation.
Hmm.
Um, and so kind of like tapping into that, and then figuring out from there whatever that underlying thing is, like approaching that area from a place of play. Like, okay, if it is change, how can you slowly, move towards it? Like, what's some one feature that you could look at and kind of look at it in a different light of curiosity, or make it like fun, or if you got one task like somehow on that software, what would that feel like? Would that be a success to you? What would success mean for you in like 2 weeks or so, right? So, and I think a lot of it has to deal with, I don't know, I do strongly feel that training of software, especially when it comes to task management and project management, which I know we'll talk about maybe one day soon,
Hmm.
is such a personal thing. So I often feel that people should be trained as such, right? Everybody's at
Hmm.
different levels, and when you can work with someone and just say, these are the things I'm struggling with, you can untangle them. And task management software is really difficult to use, because there's just so many features available. But
Hmm.
I would say, just again, just to start off slowly and kind of untangle that, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, and start
Hmm.
there, and just take it day by day, moment by moment.
So on the outside, it may look like this is task management coaching, but it's actually closer to emotional coaching, therapy, support. It really is it's an emotional shift that we're asking Simon to make, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I've worked with several people when there's a task management software rolled out, and I hear them. They're like, Renee, I don't want to. I don't know why you're making me use this, and or I'm frustrated. The
Hmm.
Usually the number one thing is I can't learn technology. I
Oh,
technology and I don't get along, or
I can be
I'm
using
not built
paper,
that
and now you want me to use software instead of the
way.
paper. Oh
Yes.
boy, boy, boy.
Yeah. and and so that takes a different kind of training, right? And that's what I'm personally afraid where these things get rolled out and people sort of get lost, because like you can do a group training and they're just listening to one person, but if you're like me, I'm thinking of 10,000 other things. I'm not paying attention to the person at the front, right? So I do wonder about people who get left out in the dust, not of their own fault, just because they just learn in a different way. They just need a little something different. Have you encountered that too,
Yeah,
Francis?
yeah. And unfortunately, the companies, I think we're at the stage where companies are the old point of view, which is that this is easy, teach yourself.
Yeah, it does
And
not work.
and if you can't teach yourself, we've got a whole bunch of digital natives lined up outside the door willing to take your job. So if
Yes.
you can't get with the program, well, we understand that maybe this isn't the right place for you. That can be the next conversation. And something about that doesn't sound, part of it isn't right, but it doesn't sound like the best decision, the best alternative. It's what you do when you've run out of answers.
Yeah. Yes.
Hmm.
And I don't agree with it. I
It's a
believe
certain
every.
lack of empathy.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Now I speak in
Hmm.
my language. Yes, very much so. And it breaks my heart because certain people are afraid to share that
Hmm.
they feel like they can't learn a new technology, so they shut down. They kind of do a little bit of Simon, I'm going to fight back, I'm just going to ignore, and I'm not going to say anything.
Hmm.
um, and then before you know it, they're sort of getting left behind because they're trying to cover up the fact, this, what they're perceiving as a weakness, right? And I don't see it as it
Hmm.
is. I just see it as a learning opportunity, and a just
Hmm.
different kind. But yeah, that
Hmm.
self-learning, that works well for the new jennies. I don't even know if that's a word, I just made it up.
Hmm.
Rather than people from, as you say, the analog gen.
Hmm. Hmm. And people don't, people who make these task management decisions, software decisions for either the original decision or the IT decision or the lack of change management, they don't usually tend to have a whole lot of IQ and not be trained in, that at the bottom of it, we're saying this is a personal emotional decision, a personal emotional shift that you're being asked to make.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yep.
it's software and it's bits and bytes, but most of what we've talked about as we start to kind of wrap up is that it's I was going to say transformation. No, 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 it's not. It could be a transformation, but the way
Hmm.
it's normally phrased and rolled out is that it's just kind of announced and told.
Yeah, it's
And
so callous, a little bit calloused.
yeah, it's kind of callous. And then, the thought is it's just software. It's just
Yeah.
like Duolingo, you're using something else. It's no longer available, and you're supposed to kind of be all rational about your response.
Yeah, and that's not fair either, because it's requiring you to learn a new habit, and you're right. It's tapping into very personal issues at any given moment, whether you're an overachiever, use something else, or you feel like you're not good with technology, and so you're hitting the nail on the head there, Francis, for sure.
Yeah, and then if companies offered staff a kind of a gamified way to approach it,
Yeah,
if it were
incentives.
just yeah, if it could be all wrapped up in a, we're think even before the switch takes place, really is where this conversation should take place. It should say we're thinking of, and we'd like for you to play with it, and as you play with it, figure out is there a large gap between what you're doing now and this, and how can you make the gap if we ever decide to go that. So there's a playful way to enter into the whole change that could be brought about, but you know the management would have to initiate that in that case.
Yes, yeah, and that goes back to change management, where we really need our leadership to figure out how they're going to approach it and roll it out over time, not overnight. And you know what,
Hmm.
Francis, I wish companies would do more betas. instead of just
Mm-hmm.
rolling it out and telling everybody, get like these small groups together and say, hey, what do you think? Try this out. Let us know what you like,
Mm-hmm.
what you don't like. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I love the idea of play and fun and just a little more lightheartedness. And if you have an issue here, let's get you the right kind of training.
Mm-hmm.
You can self train, or sure you can go to a group training, but some people might need one to one. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay too. I don't feel like it should be a shameful thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Especially in these days, because nowadays, if you're a tech native, digital native, your management is used to you picking up software and starting to use it right away.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, Renee, back in the 90s,
Just kidding.
people people,
I
people
was
used
young in the '90s too. I was young in the '90s too. We could both say that.
I I think you were maybe born and maybe in like maybe high school, maybe
I was in high school.
high school. Those of us who were in the working world already. So they had 1 day training courses in how to use Microsoft Word. They had like three
I
day
remember
courses.
that.
You
Those were the
remember
good
that?
days. Yes, I love. That's where I wanted to become a trainer. I wanted to be a corporate trainer back then. I just
Okay.
loved it. And it
And you
seems
sat
like
in you sat in a
yeah,
classroom and
yeah,
the person was up on had a thing with a projection thing, and they were like,
projector.
when you press this key, and everybody go, and and now the assumption is that if you're not a digital native, then you're the next best thing to it because you've taught you now have those skills. And no, we're not going to teach you anything. And oh, by the way, here's where you download the software that you need to use, and here's a help desk, but they have a help
Yeah,
facility, and you don't even
here's
told
some
that. They
videos.
just said, yeah, there's some videos somewhere on YouTube. Good luck.
Yeah,
And you need to be using it because guess what? Everybody else is using it. But that's the far extreme of, I think the assumption today is that sure you can teach yourself anything, right? It's just software.
yeah. It's
And
not.
I think task management is an exception to that kind of Duolingo kind of writing that Duolingo, use a different app as opposed to that one. There's millions of apps out there that do it. I think task management deserves some of the care, the empathy, the um, consideration.
Mm-hmm.
That there's an emotional side to it, then there's a productivity side to it, and there's a technology side to it, and they're all coexisting together.
One
If
in
it's
beautiful environment.
yes, and when it comes to a task management choice, this is kind of the hand that you're dealt with before you even start think about switching over.
Yeah,
How does that sound like a bit of a summary of sorts to what we would recommend the way people think about this?
I think I think it's perfect. I have a fun note to leave us off on, if you'll
Hmm.
allow.
Yeah, of course.
One of the very first things when I'm training people um, learn and adapt to Asana task management software, is
Yeah.
there is a setting. It's this little radio dial that you can toggle on to have a little bit more fun. So when you complete a task, you see these animals with unicorns with little float across your screen,
Across
or
the
when you
street.
yes, or if you say that you like a task, it does like many thumbs. It kind of sparkles out. And so of course I'm training people much older than me oftentimes, but they get a kick out of it. So I want to encourage everybody to find that setting if that's a software you use. Message me or Francis to show you how to turn it on. Maybe I should do a reel on that. But it's just so much fun. It brings the play back in, and people can have a good time with it, right? So I wanted to share that bit.
Actually, the software, the task management software I use doesn't have, as far as I know, has no unicorns and no thumbs up and there's no playful side
No.
that I'm ever found. I could be wrong, but there's no playful side. So that's a whole nother conversation for us to have about the future of task management software because it just gets down to business and then kind of it's an engineer's dream, but the engineer who all engineers have feelings, and why not? That's kind of what we're saying,
Yes.
think
Yeah.
about that as you even design the software, as you implement it, and as you think about the changes that people need to make. So, Miss Renee Clair, where can folks hear more about you and get to know you, and where can they get some of the goodies that you may have available to them?
Yes, I have lots of goodies. So, first of all, come hang out with me on Instagram. My handle's at the productive WP, the productive wellnesspreneur. And I love hanging out on there. That's my favorite social media place. And then you can also find me on my website, which is www. Did I say enough W's? Renee-Claire.com. And I have a beautiful time blocking guide and worksheet and a little video there that you can grab and then join my nifty email list as well. I've got some great master classes that I do once a quarter. So I'd love for you to come and join me and play, have fun with productivity.
Great. And let me spell out the Renee Clair just so that they know that it's not the other Renee and it's not the other Claire. So,
And they're fabulous too.
yeah, that's the problem. I got it. www.renee-clair.com.
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Renee, it's been great having you on. And folks, keep listening. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the upcoming next episode that we have here at the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast. Keep listening.
Thank you, Francis. Bye, everybody.
And on the next episode, I'll be doing a recap of all the prior episodes that have made up season 1. Make sure to tune in. And if you want to leave a comment about this episode or any aspect of the work that we're doing here at the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, you can go over to www.replytofrancis.info and send me either a message by text or send me a voice message, a voice note. And as you probably know, we have a couple of places that you can interact with other people, talk about this episode. One is at the community, mightytaskers.scheduleu.org, and you'll see the link in the show notes. And the other, of course, is our upcoming Task Management and Time Blocking Summit coming up in March. 2 outstanding opportunities to interact with other people about the ideas that you've heard on this podcast or any of our episodes that are coming up. And if you'd like to support the work we're doing, I invite you to click on the Patreon link below to make a donation. And please don't forget to like our show and recommend it to others on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, or whatever podcast app or service you're using. This is Francis Wade. I'm signing out. I hope to see you on a future episode. And until then, take care and all the best. See you later.